Prudence is called Prudence, ironically after an economic watchword that Gordon Brown was using so readily during the very depths of the economic crisis. And he kept saying, we must adopt economic prudence, we must adopt economic prudence. And we just didn't think there was anything particularly prudent about what we were doing. And so we decided to call Prudence Prudence. And so she is, the first copper pot still in London for 200 years. Not very prudent, although we love her very much. I've always loved gin, always loved it. So is Fairfax, my business partner. And I think, having drunk it for so long and never having actually sold it, I was never employed in the drinks industry. No one would have me in the gin world, so I ended up having to employ myself. But I think you could see from an industry point of view how exciting the gin category was becoming, both nationally, internationally. Gin's history's been a very checkered one. It's one that you can't help but enjoy reading about. There's so much documentation of it from its times back in the sort of Hogarth era in the 1720s, and the horrors of what it does, and even beyond that, in fact, as sort of Benedictine monks using juniper berries and things like that. I mean, it's just a fascinating history that it's got.
To him remarked his fiancée as he was set to go away. Whatever peril you are in, swear you won't resort to gin.
We here at Sipsmith really celebrate the old school way of making it, the really authentic style of distillation, what's known as one shot, where we, for example, put 1 kilo of botanicals into the chance of our still. What comes over is enough for that one batch, such that the only thing we have to do is add water to it to get it to our strength at 41.6. Whereas what everyone else will do, pretty much bar none, is add 30 or 40 times the amount of botanicals into the same charge of still, and what they'll get over is a gin concentrate. That gin concentrate will need to be stretched with alcohol and then blended with water. The benefit for them is they get 30 times the capacity than us. The benefit for us is that we get a much more complex, deeper, richer flavour to it, and it's all about flavour and quality in gin.
Sipsmith gin is a traditional London dry gin. I met Sam and Fairfax at a Negroni club party at the Beefeater Distillery. We were introduced by Geraldine Coates, who is an eminent gin writer. They wanted to create a small traditional London distillery. They were using a distillery in Idaho as one of their models. They asked if I was familiar with it. By coincidence, Anastasia and I had worked there when it opened. And we talked a bit about what a great gin should be if you were going to start a gin. We realized that we shared this philosophy of the idea that any improvement on gin was made 150 years ago. You can't add new ingredients today that will make a better gin. You can make a modern gin, you can make a different gin, something that may or may not really qualify as gin, but a true London dry gin is one of those recipes that was set down very clearly in the 1700s and perfected by the 1800s, and that's what we're making. The interesting thing about making a gin is there's no shortage of old and new formulas. If you know where to look, you can find the recipes, but it's not like finding a bread recipe and coming home and baking it, unless you live in a world where no two ovens perform the same way. And so you can take a recipe that's a perfectly good recipe, best recipe in the world, but until you've tailored that recipe for your still, it's not going to work. And that's the point at which I met Sam and Fairfax, as they had found a traditional recipe that they really liked. They had sampled it from someone else's still. They had I'd met them before Prudence arrived, but when they first set up Prudence, that's when I came in. And when they were in a panic that they needed to make a gin. And this still was not making a gin based on that recipe. And so after testing the still and learning its performance, it was relatively easy with my experience to tailor the formula to the still. That's what I'm very good at. What I'm not good at is consistently replicating that. And that's why we have Chris Garden, the young production distiller, who is a master of the science of distilling.
I'm sort of the head of operations at Sipsmith. I do everything from stock control to dry stock control to the pumping into the spirit, the weighing out of the botanicals, and the readings and the cuts that are so important to making our gold medal winning product.
10-15 minutes, Chris?
Fantastic.
Perfect replication from batch to batch, and he's gained the understanding of feeling the juniper and understanding by feel how that juniper is going to perform, so that he knows if he needs a little more or a little less in that distillation run. And the citrus, by the smell and the touch, if it's going to take a touch more or less to recreate the previous batch.
During our foray of experiments and with the 70-odd different batch runs that we had tried, we, at the same time as playing with the botanicals, which is, if you will, like the graphic equalizers of sound. Actually, alcohol is the volume knob, and so we tried lots of different pitches, and we just found that when we had the right balance, we played with the favourite 5 different recipes. We played with different volumes of alcohol, and the one that really stood out for us was the current one. Fairfax is number 3, it's called. It's really irritating. It took us a long time to make the gin, but we're proud of the outcome. 12 international medals in just under 2 years is a nice tick in the box, and we're proud of it. But it was certainly fun trying all the different experiences, and a lot of them are behind me on the shelf there. You can see them up there, and we like to go back and remind ourselves what we have. I think for a brand like Sipsmith, we are nothing without quality, and there will be no corner cutting, no jeopardising of any sort of flavour or for financial gain, because what we have developed here, I think, is really special. We are proud, albeit within these 4 walls, about what it is that we've done and what we've won in terms of accolades, for it. So yes, we've ambitions to grow, and at the moment we are running shy of capacity. We are really struggling to produce what we're being asked to produce, and we do need to move. And Chris and Jared's decision to invest in a new pot still will, half of the skill will actually be ensuring that recipe remains the same and that it is consistent all the way through. I think we're redefining what small batch is all about, and we're going to celebrate that in our DNA all the way through, right until Sipsmith is done, and hopefully that won't be my lifetime. So yes, we're growing, and I know people will watch and ask questions of our quality as we do move from Prudence when she gets a bigger sister. But our consumer promise from day one has always been and will always be that quality is absolutely paramount in everything that Sipsmith lives and breathes and dies by.
His fiancée came with a wreath as he was laid 6 feet beneath, abandoned by his kith and kin, because he did succumb to gin.